Hey guys, thanks for watching. Something cool today happened and I wanted to share it with you guys. Tim Yelverton, who is, in my opinion, the best short game instructor in the world and also a good friend of mine, was on the Golf Smarter podcast. I was on that podcast a couple months ago, just talking about Be Better Golf. And I mentioned to Fred, because he had been talking about the short game and really trying to get better, I was like, oh, you definitely got to talk to Tim. So I set it up, or helped set it up, and Fred and Tim got together and did this podcast. So I talked to Fred, and he graciously said that it was fine for me to repost it here on Be Better Golf. So check it out. It is really informative. You guys will recognize, if you've been watching the channel, you recognize some of the themes he talks about. But I really think it's a good in-depth conversation about getting really sharp from 50 yards and in. So Fred and Tim, take it away, and I'll see you guys after the video.
Golf. Get solid, consistent, predictable contact and improve your wedge play from 50 yards and in.
This is Golf Smarter.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Tim.
Fred, thank you for having me.
It's a joy to have you here because you came highly recommended from somebody who just featured on the show a couple episodes ago, Brandon DeVore.
Yeah, Brendan's a good guy. I've gotten to know him fairly well over, I guess, almost the past 9 or 10 months now, last fall. And he came to Mississippi to Old Waverly Golf Club where I teach. And we did a little work together. And then he had me out in Long Beach just a few weeks ago. So we did some work there, and we're putting together a video series, a short game video series. And so yeah, and we've had a couple schools and clinics and things like that. So yeah, so we've spent a lot of time together here recently.
Oh, well, no wonder you came highly recommended. You guys are partners.
That's right. He's fun. We complement each other well. He knows what he's doing with the video inside of it. And he's, I think he would say himself that he's somewhat of a golf junkie. He loves golf. There's no doubt about it.
That was clear.
So we fit well together for sure.
That's nice. That's nice. Do you work with any other PGA touring professionals?
Yeah, I work with Jonathan Randolph, who's on the PGA Tour. Allie McDonald and Sydney Clanton, they're both on the LPGA Tour. I worked with Kevin Kisner and Scott Brown we worked for about 3 years together. They're a full swing coach, and their main coach is John Tillery, and he and I are good friends, and he asked me to come in and help them out with some putting and short game stuff. And so we worked together pretty much from 2014, 15, and 16. We worked together for about 3 years. Yeah.
Well, you said the magic words, putting and short game.
Yeah.
That's what I'm so glad that we're here to talk about today, because I don't think that it's concentrated on enough. It's weird. After doing this podcast for 12 years now, some things are finally becoming clear to me, and I still don't know how clear they are, but I've changed my warm-up. I don't get a chance to practice all that much, and when I do, it's only my short game. I don't work on my swing mechanics. I just work on short targets. But I'm also realizing that, when I go to play around, I generally like to get to the course an hour early. I know that's really hard for so many people to do. I've got some luxuries in my work schedule that allow me to do that. But when I'm playing golf, I really want to focus on it. And I need that time, because if I don't warm up, it feels like I'm testing out my swing all through the round. So when I get to the first tee, I want to feel like, okay, I know what's happening with my clubs somewhat.
Sure.
But boy, that was too long. So what I've just recently started to do, and I realize, is that I'll put about 25, maybe 30% into my swing when I warm up, and the rest of the time is all short game. It's either putting, chipping around the green, doing my pick shot, doing my lob wedge, but everything really like 50 yards and in. I don't do a whole lot more, and it's been paying off dividends. My scores have been dropping lately, and I'm shocked.
Yeah, and everybody knows that putting is dependent on the player, obviously, but about 40% of your score. And then when you start counting for chips and pitches and bunker shots, and then maybe even throw in a wedge shot or two, it's well over 60%.
Of your scoring, yeah.
Your total score, yeah, absolutely. And so many people, the driver's important. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the guys that we see week in and week out at the top of the leaderboard, there'll be a few exceptions, but for the most part, they really do hit it a long way. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, so the few exceptions, we're both thinking about Jordan Spieth on number 13 with that drive at the Open Championship, right? I mean, that was the most amazing bad shot that I've ever seen. But,
that I think they're going to actually put a plaque there.
Oh, yeah, they should.
Yeah.
Forget the plaque. There should be a course. There should be a semester-long, if not a year-long course on those last 5 holes and how to get yourself out of trouble.
Yeah, he did an amazing job. He's been doing it for a while, and then goes back to the way he trained and practiced when he was a junior golfer with Cameron and McCormick, and I mean they've obviously done a great job, learning how to score, whether you're hitting it great or just trying to manage around, getting in the hole.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted, and I'm real good at that. You were talking about the driver is so important, but
yeah, I mean it is. I mean there's no doubt. I mean it's the one club that most players are going to hit 14 times around, occasionally a 3-wood or a hybrid. But for the most part, we are going to hit a lot of drivers. And it does set up the way the hole is played. But then after that, inside of 30, 50 yards, if you have a shot 50, 60 yards from the hole, you probably chose to be there. Usually our misses are not going to be that far from the hole. And then our layups and par 4s are usually going to be outside of that distance. So if somebody's on a time crunch, the last thing they really need to do is go hit 70, 60, and 50 yarders, but they should really concentrate that time inside of 50 because most of our misses are going to be within about 90 feet of the hole, and that's 30 yards. So, a lot of time does need to be sort of allocated for those 30, 40 yards in, just like you were saying.
Yeah. Where do you start with that? Where do with the whole concept of turning 3 shots into 2, and you're teaching this, do you start at the putting green or do you start back in the fairway?
It's
in my case in the rough.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. It's player dependent.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on some players chip better, some players putt better. Ultimately, scrambling percentage, if you think of it just scrambling percentage, is usually proximity, honestly. It's the ability to chip it 3 feet or 4 feet from the hole rather than 8 or 9 feet from the hole.
Right.
We all know that tour players, the very best players in the world, only make 50% of their 8-footers. So, but they make over 90% of their 4-footers. So it's just that little bit of cleaner contact or landing in a slightly better spot or hitting it just a touch higher or lower. Those are the pieces that ultimately dictate whether we get it on the green and 2-putt or get it on the green and then make the putt and save that par or make a birdie on a par 5. So I would say for the most part, chipping and pitching are more important than putting to have a better scrambling percentage. Now, obviously that varies from player to player, but for the masses, I would say if you want to, improve your scrambling, learn to chip it and pitch it just a step or 2 closer to the hole.
And I need to do this because there's a debate that goes on our rounds. Can you please define scrambling for me so I can repeat it?
I would say anytime that you miss the green in regulation and you have a chance to make par, that would be scrambling. Can you get it on the green and in the hole in 2 shots?
Okay.
That's how I would define scrambling.
Okay. So shooting par, but not being on the green in regulation.
Right.
Okay. But an up and down is 1 putt. Doesn't matter where your score is. You could be 1 putt for double bogey as long as you're off the green, on the green, and 1 putt. Is that up and down?
I think so. I think I know. Like I know some of the different stats apps and programs that you can use. They have them separate, up and down percentage and scrambling percentage. Honestly, and kind of in my world, I don't care if the player lies 2 by the green or 4. I want them to get it on the green and in the hole in 2 shots.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Chipping and pitching is more important than putting. Let's start with your lob wedge.
Mm-hmm.
Some people shouldn't have one in their bag. At least a friend of mine said, I was playing with a caddy recently and he told me, don't take out your 60 degree, just leave it in your bag or leave it at home. Comments?
People are scared to death of their lob wedge. There are a lot of people that just refuse to hit it. Ultimately, the only difference in a lob wedge and a sand wedge is obviously loft and a little bit different sole as far as bounce is concerned. Generally speaking, sand wedges have more bounce. They're a little easier not to hit fat. The lob wedge typically has a little less bounce, and obviously it has more loft. In the video series that we did, we start with contact and really focus on making sure the player has solid, consistent, predictable contact. And then from there, once a player has really good contact, then it's all about managing loft and speed. So with a lob wedge, you obviously have more loft delivered to the golf ball, so therefore you need more speed, clubhead speed, delivered to the golf ball to make it go the same distance, as opposed to maybe having a 52 that you would deliver less loft, therefore you need less speed. And I always go, that's always part 2. So I always address contact with a player, because if contact is inconsistent, then we literally have no idea how hard to swing, and we don't know if the ball is going to come out fast or slow, if it's going to come out low or high, so we're completely guessing. So contact is always at the top of the food chain or the hierarchy as far as short game is concerned.
Yeah, contact is king, huh?
Absolutely.
In my business, I've always said content is king, but I can understand where contact would be king too.
Exactly.
Solid, consistent, predictable contact.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to believe that more than 75% of your students, first thing they're asking for is more consistency.
Yes, that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to be more consistent. Yeah, and when people say, "Oh, look at Fred," or "Look at Jim, he's got such great touch, such great feel," ultimately that's where we're trying to go to. That's what we're trying to achieve, but we can't really achieve that unless we have consistent contact, and because that dictates how fast the ball is coming out. And then from there, then we figure out, okay, well, I want to land it in this spot with this certain trajectory that matches up. So yeah, everybody wants to be more consistent. But I played basketball. That was kind of my other sport growing up. So I use a lot of basketball examples.
Sure.
But if we didn't know how much a basketball weighed until after we shot it, it would be impossible, right? So if one time it's full of feathers, the next time it's full of lead. One time we'd shoot it over the backboard, the next time we'd shoot it, 2 feet in front of us, right? So it's kind of that way in the short game. So if you don't know how solid you're about to hit this golf ball, then you have no idea what speed the ball is about to come out, so you have no idea how hard to swing. So I would say that contact is probably minimum 80% of the short game. I mean, if contact is good, we all know how to hit it a little higher or a little lower. And then most players that have played golf for just a small amount of time have a pretty good idea of where to land it. So once we kind of tidy up contact and make it consistent, then we have a very good handle on the short game.
A friend of mine said the other day, he's like, I just need to be more consistent. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Tell me about your scoring. What's your scoring been lately? He goes, oh, I'm in the upper 80s, low 90s, pretty much all the time. I said, then aren't you consistent? And he goes, well, no, that's not, ball hitting consistent. I said, but you are. If you're scoring the same pretty much, how much do you practice on this? He goes, practice? I don't have time to practice. I said, then what are you complaining about? You're playing pretty well then, I would think. Confidence and contact. You just said contact is 80%. Does that only leave 20% for confidence? I mean, where does confidence go? Because to me, I can make that contact, but if I think I'm in a hard pan, or if there's an uneven lie on the grass, or it's in a divot or something, all of a sudden my confidence starts to disappear.
And here's how I always teach and coach players is we build a motion that would work off of just a flat fairway cut lie. Okay, so that's their base motion. And then from that base motion, then once that's consistent, then I'll teach them and coach them to understand how to hit more down on it or less down on it. Okay, so they'll shallow or steepen their strike. If you think about, I always use the example of landing an airplane on a runway. So, you have the runway here, the airplane's coming down at about 3 degrees. All right, that would be our flat fairway cut lie. Now, if an airplane was coming in to land and the runway shifted like this, the airplane could still land. It would just have to shallow its approach to regain that 3 degrees. Vice versa, if it was coming in like this, the runway shifted this way, it'd be fine. You just have to steepen your approach to regain your 3 degrees. So really, that's what we're doing when we have a ball on a downslope, when we have a ball on hard pan, upslope, into the grain, soft lies, firm lies, balls buried in the rough, or balls sitting up on 3 inches of zoysia. So all the time, that's what makes the short game, one, challenging, and in my opinion, it's what makes it fun, because we have to always we have to adapt. Where a tee shot, you're adapting curve, but you're always on a flat lie. You get to tee it up as high as you want to, so you kind of set the stakes there, right? Where the short game, you very rarely do you ever have the same shot in a tournament, much less in a round. So that's what I think is so fun about it is kind of adapting and then sort of improvising, because it definitely brings out the creative side of the player.
Yeah, and you really, until you start feeling comfortable with your tools, and we'll just say your lob wedge or whatever, pitching wedge, so you start, the creativity part is still a way off.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to get creative if you really don't have good control in your mind of what's going on with that club.
Yeah, if you can see it all day, but if you don't have the skills to hit it, you still can't hit the shot. And that, and that's where, like, when you were talking about the confidence from the hard pan or whatever lie it may be, once you're able to hit the base shot, then it's just a matter of understanding how to implement a steeper strike or a shallower strike, depending on what lie you have in front of you. And then obviously you have to try it out in practice to get the feel for it before you try it in competition, or maybe not, it depends on what you want to do. But that being said, and then it's just a progression. You learn vanilla, right? And then from there, then you sprinkle on some chocolate syrup, and then you go with some rainbow sprinkles and some whipped cream or whatever you want on there. But you always start with vanilla, and then you just build on top from there.
That was the best analogy I've ever heard. The best metaphor, using ice cream. I want to apologize to our podcast listeners on audio only. Tim was explaining it to me. It made total sense what he was saying about the angles, because he was using his hands and I was watching it. This video, I'm recording this on video and of course on audio, and the video is available on our YouTube channel at Golf Smarter TV. So if you want to see what his hands were doing to explain that a little better, then please check that out. One of the other things that I find so interesting and hard to, I don't want to use the word master, get comfortable with, is how high I want, like say I'm between 10 and 20 yards off the green, okay? And the flag is either middle or the back. Let's not talk about a front flag at this point. How high do I want to get the ball in the air and close to the pin in the air? Mm-hmm. Or how low do I want to keep it, and how long do I want to let it roll? How do I figure out what I want to do with that? Because that one, I think, so many people, I think, are lobbing to try to get as close to the hole as they possibly can, and I've seen that and I've done it, when that really isn't going to help, because if it doesn't get all the way to the hole and, and just take a short roll, and it releases, now all of a sudden I'm 20 feet past the hole.
Right. There's a couple ways that I tell players to do that, and especially like new players or players that don't get to play a lot, or younger juniors. that are relatively new, sometimes they don't like options because then they don't really know, should I land it here with a lower trajectory or fly it farther with a higher trajectory? You know, what I tell juniors is, and I mean young juniors, is like I'm like, all right, take 2 balls. The first one, from right here where this ball is, let's just say we have, just to give it some numbers, let's say we have 5 steps of fringe or rough, and then we have 15 steps of green. So it's a 20-yard shot total. I say, okay, you can land this ball anywhere you want to, just toss it over there and make it stop by the hole. Well, all of them underhanded will roll and land it, you know, maybe 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 at the most onto the green. None ever throw it more than halfway, and then it rolls up somewhere around the hole. And I'm like, okay, so that's more of the type of shot you should play. So that sort of gives them just the visual of like, okay, if I could toss this ball any way I wanted to and land it anywhere I want to, how would I do that? No one would ever try to, you know, since we have 20 yards, no one ever tries to throw it 17 yards, you know, real high and try to stop it. They all land it halfway or even a little short of halfway and let it roll, because we innately understand that's the best way to make the ball stop where we want it to stop and land where we want it to land. The second way I tell players to do that, and some people love this next one, some people hate it, but it's kind of goes with brain type of thing. But anyway, is sort of have a baseline. When you go out to the chipping green, find a nice flat chip where it's not a big upslope or downslope, and fly your sand wedge 10 yards, and then see how far it rolls. And then fly your gap wedge 10 yards, see how far it rolls. Pitching wedge 10 yards, and then you have a baseline for, okay, under these conditions, obviously they can change with firmness of the green and speed and things like that. But if I fly at 10, how far does it roll? And then you have a baseline for understanding, okay, my 52 is kind of my 10 to 10. If I fly at 10, it'll roll 10. So that sort of gives you a baseline to base everything off of. And maybe you had a bunker in between you and the hole, and you have to fly at 15 and roll 5. Well, then you obviously know it's the lob wedge. Vice versa, if you want to fly at 5 and roll 15, then depending on the player, it's probably somewhere around an 8-iron. So, but that gives them something sort of concrete rather than, because sometimes people don't like options. When they see all that green between them and the hole, they don't like that. They'd rather just say, tell me what to do. You know what I mean? So that's a good way to just establish a nice baseline for 10 yards in the air. How far did it roll? You can't really do it into 30 and 40 yards, because then every club, you know, like a sand wedge is never going to roll farther than it flew at 40 yards unless you scull.
Yeah.
Unless you
Okay. 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 Do you subscribe to the concept and the notion of getting the ball onto the green as quickly, onto the flat surface as quickly as possible, and just let it roll for as long as you can, as opposed to
most of the time, yes. Occasionally there's easier landing spots to land in that are more conducive to the shot. But for the most part, yeah. I mean, it's like throwing a ball. If you're trying to throw it and land it at a certain place, it's easier to throw it on a line than it is to lob it. Think about a quarterback trying to throw it over the linebackers and short of the safety. That's a hard pass. They'd rather throw it on a line straight across. And so golf's the same way. With wedges, tour players launch their wedges pretty low for as high as they actually hit the golf ball in the full swing. And the reason why, it's more predictable. So it's more predictable where the ball is going to land rather than the one that shoots straight up and then straight down. Tour players hit it very high with their full swing, but they actually flight their wedges quite low. And you can not always, but most of the time you can really kind of give wedge handicaps just purely by launch. You know, the better the player, you could almost say the better the player, the lower they launch it.
Really?
Yeah, tour players are going to launch it somewhere around 30, where I would say that maybe just your average guy that shoots 82 probably launches it upwards of the upper 30s, maybe sometimes even 40. Yeah, they definitely launch it higher.
Wow. I love the idea of figuring out one shot, but with different clubs. You know, it's like, as opposed to taking, okay, I'm going to take this club and I'm going to hit it 60 yards. I'm going to take this club, I'm going to hit it 80 yards. I'm going to take this club and hit it 90 yards, right? As opposed to, okay, I got a 40-yard shot or a 45, 50-yard shot, or even a 30-yard shot. Now I'm going to try 3 different clubs. I'm going to practice 3 different clubs just at that distance. I think that's just a great idea. I've lately been doing a lot of that with my mid irons, is like how, not only how far and what's my trajectory on a normal shot, but how low can I pitch that, and how far, if I get a good pitch, because there's a lot of trees here and I seem to be under them most of the time. How low can I keep that club down, and how far will it go, so I know how I can get myself out of trouble, and how much, so I don't chip it all the way to the other side of the fairway because I'm just trying to get out of these trees.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of, like I said earlier, I always start with contact with players. And then once contact is really good, then we move into like what I call a 3-ball practice. So they'll take the same club, drop 3 balls, and then hit the same club to the same target with 3 different combinations of trajectory and spot, which is ultimately loft and speed. So they'll hit a low one, and then they'll hit a medium shot, then they'll hit a high shot. And that really creates touch. It creates imagination, feel, visualization, things like that. But ultimately, it helps the player understand how much loft they're delivering to the golf ball, and then how much speed they need to match it up to make all 3 balls go the same distance with ultimately different speeds and different lofts. So that's pretty much part 2 of a typical practice plan. If somebody came in for a golf lesson, that would be their second part of their practice plan.
So when you are working with a student, and you know that you need to work on their short game, but they do need some help on their mechanics. If they only come in, and I'm sure a lot of people just come in for a lesson because they need, I'm going on vacation this week and I'm playing golf 3 times and I haven't played in 6 months, so I need a lesson. Yeah. What do you focus on? Do you work on their short game at that point? Do you tell them, listen, let's just forget about your other clubs, let's just go short game? Or it's like, let's tinker with your swing, which is really going to screw them up, right?
Yeah. And what we do at Old Waverly, it's all I do is teach short game. So I teach all putting and short game. VJ Trolio teaches all the full swing lessons. So if they're coming to me, they're working on that anyway. Now, if I were teaching full swing as well, I would tell them, spend a little bit of time with the driver, because we know that is going to affect how they play. And then from there, let's work on contact in our short game, and let's work on distance control and putting. So I might break an hour lesson into 20, 20, 20, 20 minutes on the driver, 20 with contact around the green, and then 20 making sure that their touch, their distance control is really good with their putting, because that's obviously, we know how many strokes we can gain or lose there.
Okay guys, hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. Thanks to Fred and Tim for getting together and doing that. If you guys want to see the rest of it, go over to the Golf Smarter YouTube page. Just type in Golf Smarter and you'll see Fred's YouTube page on there. Also on the Apple iTunes store, if you type in golf, actually the very first thing that comes up under podcasts is Golf Smarter. On there, you notice that Tim was talking about this video product we made. It is the Be Better Golf short game scoring system. It talks all about exactly how to put together an elite short game, starting with contact. Contact is absolutely king, as you heard him just say, and really how to build an incredible base motion from which, that's like, once you can do that, that's like 80% of it. And then you start putting on the finishing touches of loft and speed. It's been a huge revelation for me. I know that some of my friends and also some Be Better Golf subscribers from all over the world have been sending me messages about how much they like it and everything. So it's at bebettergolf.net/scoring. So check that out, and I'll talk to you guys later. So check that out. It's a great way to get your short game way sharper and support the channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.
Shout out to Be Better Golf Show for dropping that knowledge. Go check out his short game special. It's lit.